भवानी शंकरौ वंदे श्रद्धा विश्वास रूपिणौ याभ्यां विना न पश्यन्ति सिद्धा स्वान्तमईश्वरम् वंदे बोधमयं नित्यं गुरुं शंकररूपिणं यमाश्रितो हि वक्रोऽपि चन्द्र सर्वत्र वन्द्यते सीताराम गुणग्रामं पुण्यारण्यविहारिणौ वन्दे विशुद्ध विज्ञानौ कवीश्वर कपीश्वरौ उद्भव स्थिति संहार कारिणीं क्लेशहारिणीं सर्वश्रेयस्य कारीं सीतां नतोऽहं रामवल्लभाम् नीलाम्बुजश्यामलकोमलाङ्गं सीता समारोपितवामभाग्यं पानौ महासायकचारुचापं नमामि रामं रघुवंशनाथम्। सुंदर नंद Our chairperson tonight, President of Gaayatri Mandir, Ramjas, Pandit Lakshman, my dear sisters and brothers. It is a special joy and honor for me to be with you tonight and also tomorrow night for this yagna. And I thank you for your warm and loving welcome. For me, when I arrived, I was deeply touched and moved by your love. Last month, I had the opportunity, or I was invited to travel to the Far East, and I visited Myanmar and Thailand. But my visit was primarily to Myanmar. And I was there with a group of people who were visiting refugee camps. There is a lot of violence in the country of Myanmar, and many people have been displaced from their homes. They have been forced to flee their homes because of violence, and they live in these camps, refugee camps. And some of them have been living in these camps for over 10 years. So this is far in the interior of Myanmar, in the north of this country. And so this small group of us visited in the course of 1 week. We traveled deep into the interior of Myanmar, and we visited about a dozen refugee camps. And the living conditions were terrible. There were lots of young children, there were mothers with nursing babies, young boys and girls who were growing up in these camps with minimal, very little to live on. They depend on the charity of others. So we would go to one of these camps, and then they would announce, that some visitors have come from abroad, and the people will come out of their small huts, and they will come to meet us. And so we spoke to them with the help of translators, and they asked us questions, we asked them questions, we talked to them, we tried to understand what their needs were and what we could do to help them, help alleviate or improve their conditions. But I was not expecting what happened at the end of each meeting. And sometimes there would be as many as 200 or 300 people who came out for these to meet us. But as soon as they knew that we were finished, everyone, young, old, rushed forward, and they wanted to touch us and to be touched by us. As though, it was not over for them until they held our hands and we touched them and they touched us. This was a very powerful experience for me because clearly, in a sense, it was all that they had to give. Just this embrace. This was all that they could give us to say, what our visit meant to them. And they wanted in turn to be touched or to be embraced by us. And they brought their babies, some of the babies were clearly ill and not well, and they just wanted us to touch their babies. So this touch was very important to them. It meant everything to them. And for me, it was also the most memorable part of my meeting with these people. The importance of that physical touch or contact. Obviously, it made them feel valuable. It added to their sense of self-value or self-worth. So when I came back, I wanted to think a little more about what I had experienced with these people, and especially with this desire to be touched and to touch. What does, how does the Hindu tradition, what value does it give to this kind of meeting? So tonight I want to share with you how I connect, how I relate this experience that I had in Myanmar with all of these people, women, old men, babies, clearly, living in very difficult and even unsanitary conditions, but they wanted to be touched. So I'm going to share with you a couple of incidents in the Ramayana of Tulsidas, where this issue of touching becomes very important and very significant. So I start with the exile of Ram. You know the story of the Ramayana. Ram is forced to give up the throne of Ayodhya because Bharata's mother wants Bharat to be the king, and the king had made promises to his wife. So she chooses to fulfill these promises that Ram must be banished and Bharat must occupy the throne. So he goes into exile, and a large part of the text, the Ramayana, tells us about all the experiences of Ram and all of his encounters in exile. But then he comes to this particular forested area called Sringaverapura, where there is a group of what we will call today in the United States and elsewhere, native people, indigenous communities. In India they are called the Adivasis, the original inhabitants. These are forest-dwelling people, not city dwellers. So he comes to this place, Sringaverapura, and one of the leaders of this tribe, the tribe is called the Nishadas. They are the Nishadas, and the tribal leader is a man by the name of Guha. Guha is a tribal leader. His tribe is the Nishad tribe. So he comes into their territory, as it were, and Guha hears that he has visitors. So I'm going to recite some of the verses of the text, and I invite all of you to chant with me, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram, and then I will share these portions of the text with you. So first, the meeting between Shri Ram and Guha. Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Rama 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 Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Rama Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Rama Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Rama Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Rama Yah sukhi guha nishad jab pai mudit liye priya bandhu bolaaye liye phal mool bhet paribhara milan chale hiya harsh utara Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Rama 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 Kari dandavat bhet dhari aage Prabhu hi bilokat ati anurage Sahaj sneha pibas raghurai Puchi kushal nikat baithai Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Rama 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 So, yahan Shuddhi Guha Nishad Jabapai, when this tribal indigenous leader hears that these visitors have come, he joyfully, with great joy, Mudita liye priya bandhu bolai. So he joyfully calls his people, the tribal people, and said, let's go to meet these visitors. And they took with them phala, mool, roots and fruits, whatever they had in the forest, whatever they ate, they took these with them to meet Shri Ram. They went out to meet Shri Ram. Kari danda vata bheta dhariyake. So as Ram approaches, he falls at the feet of Ram and then lifts his head to gaze into Ram's eyes. And then Tulsidas says that Sahaja Saneha Vivasa Raghurai, Ram, who is won over easily, Sahaj Saneha, that Sri Ram, who is won over easily by love, who can't resist love, Sahaj Saneha, especially sincere love. So he saw in the eyes of this tribal leader a deep and sincere love. And this is, Tulsidas says, this is Ram's nature, that he's easily won over by the sincerity of love. Saj Saneha Bibas Ragurai, Puja Kushala Nikata Baithai. Immediately, he brings this man close to him to sit. Nikat means very close. He doesn't say, keep your distance. He brings him very close to him and he asks him, Puja, how are you? How are you doing? He inquires about his well-being. So this, immediately, Sri Ram responds very positively to this tribal person, to this tribal leader. Responds also physically. Tulsidas says, he brings him very close to him. He doesn't sit at the foot of Ram, he sits next to Ram. Nikata Baitahai, close to him, next to him. I want you to keep this in mind, this encounter in mind, because then Guha talks to him, and the tribal leader makes a special request of Ram. He says, Kripa Kariya Puradhariya Pau. So I want to ask you something. Please come with me. Could you come with me to my village? Come with me to my village. So that everyone will see. This is very interesting. So people will see how you've accepted me. Could you come with me? Come to my village. Because I want people to see that Ram, the Prince of Ayodhya, has made me his own, has accepted me. So Ram says, I appreciate what you ask. Kahi hu satya sabu sakha sujana. I understand what you want of me. Mohi deen hi pitu aaye suhana. But I have some limits. Because I have the word of my father to fulfill and I cannot go into a village. I have to stay in the forest. I have to wander in these forests, so I can't come with you. He explains to him the conditions of his banvas, the conditions of his exile that don't permit him to go into these inhabited areas. So he doesn't go with him. So I want you to remember this incident, because I am moving on now to a little bit later in the Ayodhya Kand of Ramacharitmanas. So now we know what happened. Ram is in exile. Then his brother Bharat comes home, because when all of this happened, when the entire incident happened with his mother and her demands for Ram's exile and the enthronement of Bharat. Bharat was not there. In fact, he was visiting his grandfather. He was with his grandfather. So when he comes to Ayodhya, he learns for the first time what had happened. He was very surprised to know that, what his mother had done and what has happened to his elder brother. Because he was not at all involved in any of her plans. And we see, when he got the news of what had happened, he was very sad. He was in deep sorrow because he could not understand why anyone would want to exile his brother, who was the rightful successor or heir to the throne. And he was very angry with his mother for trying to gain political power for him at Ram's expense. He didn't want, this is not what Bharat wants. So as you know, he completely refuses to sit on the throne of Ayodhya, and he felt that the only option for him was to go in search of his brother, to find his brother, to look for Ram, and to say, no, come back to Ayodhya because the throne is yours. So Bharat starts this journey to go and persuade Ram to come back to Ayodhya, and he goes in search of his brother, and he comes also to Sringaverapura. He also arrives at this at the place in the forest where these indigenous people, these Adivasis, live. He arrives there. Now, Guha, as I told you before, had already met Ram, and he had heard of what happened, how Ram was exiled, and so on. So when Guha heard that Bharat had come into the forest to look for Ram, Guha was very suspicious. He was very suspicious because he thought, Bharat had come to kill Ram, so that he would have no rivals for the throne. Because Bharat came with an army. That was a big group of them who accompanied him. So he was suspicious of Bharat's motives for coming into the forest in search of his brother. So he was determined to prevent Bharat from crossing the Ganga. And he assembled his indigenous people with what weapons they had, their bows and arrows and so on, to do battle with Bharat. He was ready to die to protect Ram. Fortunately, just before the hostilities broke out, one of the elders in the tribe said, no, let's not act in haste. Perhaps we are wrong about Bharata's motives. Let's not judge him. Let's at least try to meet him, and we can determine what his intentions are. Why is he in the forest following his brother? So a decision is made to reach out to this stranger in their midst. So as he did with Sri Ram, the indigenous people, they're very hospitable people. So he again gathers, some fruits, some roots, whatever they eat, they bring with them, and they go to meet Bharat. So taking an offering of food is a sort of a symbol of friendship. We have come in peace. We've not come with hostile motives. So it signifies, the desire for peace and friendship. So it's like how we would invite somebody to our homes and offer them a meal. So then Guha, tribal leader, goes forward to meet Bharat. But before he meets Bharat, at the head of the party is the family's guru, Vashishta, is there. So Vashishta sees him first, and this is what happens when Vashishta sees him. Shri Ram Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Rama, 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 Shri Ram Jaya Ram, Jaya Jaya Rama. देखी कहीं निज नामो, कीन्ह मुनि सही दंड प्रणामो। जान राम प्रिय दीन्हि अशेषा, भरत ही कहेहु बुझाई मोनीसा। श्री राम जय राम, जय जय रामा, श्री राम जय राम, जय जय रामा, श्री राम जय राम, जय जय रामा, श्री राम जय राम, जय जय रामा। देखी kahi nij namu. When Guha, the tribal leader, sees Vashishta, the guru, at the head of the procession, and this is important, I'll come back to that. He says his name, Nijanamu. He recites his name very loud. I am Guha. So he gives his name and he prostrates. Danda pranamu. He prostrates at the feet of Vashishta, the guru. And then the guru, through some source, knew that Ram had met Guha before, that there was an encounter. So he tells Bharat, in one word, he says, Jani Rama Priya, that this man is a friend of Ram, Ram Priya. You know, Priya means a friend, but this is a man loved by Ram. This is a man beloved. Ram loves him. He's Ram Priya. He's dear to Ram. He's loved by Ram. He's Ram's beloved, Ram Priya. So Jani Ram Priya Deen Hi Asisa Bharata Hi Kehu Pujai Munisa. He announces this to Bharat. This is all he says. This is a person who Ram loves, who is dear to Ram, who is beloved by Ram. And this word, I will speak a little more about the Ram Priya. This is what Bharat hears. Ram Priya. And something happens to Bharat when he hears this. His reaction is immediate, as Tulsidas describes. Ram Sakha Suni Sadano Tyaga Chale Uttari Uma Kat Anuraga. Ram Sakha Suni Sadano Tyaga Chale Uttari Uma Kat Anuraga. Gaon Jati Guha Naam Sunai King Johar Mat Mahilai. Gaon Jati Guha Naam Sunai King Johar Mat Mahilai. Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. 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 करत दंडवत देखित ही भरत लीन उरलाई. मनहु लखन सन भेट भई प्रेमन हृदय समाई. सिया पति रामचंद्र जी की जय. शरण शंकर हरि ओम जय जय सिया राम. So Tulsidas says, when Bharat hears these words, Ram Priya, that this is a man who is loved by Ram. Ram Sakha. Sakha means friend also. He's a friend of Ram Sakha. Suni. He immediately, Sadanutyaga, he jumps off his chariot. Sadanutyaga, Chale Utari Umagata Anuraga, and goes to meet Guha, Umagata Anuraga, with a heart overflowing with love. With a heart filled with love, he rushes forward to meet Guha. But as he comes, I'm going to talk a little more about this. Gaon Jati Guha Naam Sunai. So this is interesting. As Bharat comes and towards him, he announces who he is. Why, Gaon means the village. This is my village. I've come from this village. He says what his jati is. You know that word jati? Yes. Yeah. He announces his caste. Village, caste, jati. Gaon jati noun and his name he announces for Bharat. That is significant. He did the same for Vasishta also. Does it for Bharat. And he places his head at Bharata's feet. Now Guha was a total stranger to Bharat. But all Bharat knew is that this man was loved by Ram. He was Ram's Sakha. He was Ram Priya. He was dear to Ram. He was beloved to Ram. That was all he knew. Right? When he heard that, that is what influenced him, influenced his response to Guha. He went with great love in his heart to meet him. Now, the people, so there are people there also who are observing what is happening. They are observing this interaction between Bharat and Guha. And they are talking among themselves. They are observing and they are whispering among themselves. There could be people, we're not sure, there could be people from either with Bharata's party or people from Guha, but I suspect the text doesn't tell us exactly. So I suspect that there are people who were with Bharat, who are saying these words. So Bharat touches Guha, he embraces him. Right? He has physical contact with him. He expresses his affection in a loving embrace of Guha. But the people are saying to themselves now, as they are seeing this, they are saying, Lok bed sab bhanti necha jas chah chuhi le asecha. Lok bed sab bhanti necha jas chah chuhi le asecha. Tehi bhari ang Ram lagu brata. Tehi bhari ang Ram lagu brata. Milat pulat pari purit gata. Tehi bhari ang Ram lagu brata. Milat pulat pari purit gata. Shri Ram Jaya Ram Jaya Jaya Rama. 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 So they realize that what they are seeing is something unusual. This is not a normal kind of interaction between these two. So they are asking themselves, well, what is going on here? Loka Veda, so Loka means, the community, people, Loka, people, and Tulsidas also, so Veda. Now, keep in mind one thing, when in the Ramayana, the word Veda, which is the language in his writing is Veda. Veda Sanskrit becomes Veda. But when Tulsidas uses the word Veda, he's not talking specifically about the Rik, Sam, Yajur, and Atharva Veda. He's using it generally to talk about scriptures. So it will, for him, Veda also is a more inclusive term. It will include the Puranas, Smritis, and so on. It's a word that he uses for sacred texts. So now they are saying to themselves, Loka Veda Saba Bhantihi Nicha. That people say, the Loka say, and even the scriptures say, that this man is a low man. Saba Bhantihi Nicha. That he is the lowest of the low. Nicha means low. That this man is Sababhanti Nicha. People say, and some of the scriptures say, that Guha is the lowest of the low. Loka Beda Sababhanti Nicha. Jasu Chaha Chui Lehi Asicha. So much so, he is so low that if someone touches him, that person has to go and bathe. That person must have a ritual bath, a ceremonial bath, because by touching this man, you become impure. This is what they are gossiping now among themselves. What is going on here? This man is an outcast, and contact with him is not permitted. He's a man from whom you should stay far. Right? You don't want to touch, because if you touch him, you also become impure. That's what they are saying. Tehi bhari anka rama lagu brata milata pullaka paripurita gata. And this man, Tehi bhari anka rama lagu brata, Ram's younger brother, Ram lagu brata, Ram's younger brother, is clasping him to his heart. Milata pullaka paripurita gata. Is this the man that Bharat is embracing now to his heart? So this is what they are saying. What is happening here? How could Bharat embrace this man that even some of the scriptures and the community says he is Sababhanti Nicha. He is the lowest of the low. And Bharat is embracing him, taking him to his heart with joy. So people, look, we come from a wonderful religious tradition, the Hindu tradition. But we are not perfect people. We have not been, we are not, and we will never be. That's a fact. And we have not behaved in proper ways, in just ways, in loving ways, in compassionate ways to people in our own community. In ancient India, there are communities. They are called the untouchables. So clearly, when you read this text, you know that Guha was regarded as an untouchable. An untouchable means what it means. In Sanskrit, it is asprishya. Those who are not to be touched. Why? Because they are regarded as impure. And if you touch them, you become impure. So this is a community that Gandhi called the Harijans. Okay, they call themselves today Dalits. So we have that problem. We have to also look at ourselves always. No religious community, whether you're Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Jew, no community is perfect. Every community has its challenges. And we also have our challenges. And we have to be honest about these things. If we want to grow, if we want to change, we have to be honest about these things. So Guha belonged to such a community. And this is why Guha had to announce his name, his village, and his jati, so that people will stay away. This is historical fact, that people who belong to such communities, they were required to announce themselves when they entered into a town or village, so that others will know that an untouchable is here and we should stay away from such people. So this is the context here. And so those who are observing, they know this. They know this. So they can't understand how Bharat is violating these kinds of social rules by